The Antonio Brown saga has been one of the more talked about stories that's ever gone on in the NFL, at least in the past decade since he came into the league. Whether it's the past troubles he's had in the past about year and a half, or it's the story he has being a 6th-round pick and becoming an all-pro wide receiver. Antonio Brown saw the team who made him into an all-pro wide receiver after taking him in the 6th round of the 2010 NFL Draft. He saw that team trade him to the Oakland Raiders due to the fact that he had a little bit of trouble with both the management and the coaching in Pittsburgh, and I believe many people within the Steelers organization were somewhat ready to move on from Antonio Brown. After taking many of the problems that he had with Pittsburgh to Oakland, Mike Mayock and the Oakland Raiders organization didn't hesitate to get rid of him, and before the season even started, he was cut before the end of preseason, actually. He was then brought in by the New England Patriots for about 1 to 2 weeks before he was cut due to the issues that he had with his personal trainer. Antonio Brown is at this point where he's been a free agent for about close to a year now, and there hasn't really been many people lining up to really sign the guy who has not been able to work with 3 organizations in about 12 months. And that's understandable for many people. With all the problems that Antonio Brown has gone through and all the baggage that Antonio Brown gives off that he has, it's understandable that he has not been signed. But I do still believe that Antonio Brown could be a great contributor for a team, and if he's put into the right situation, could really blossom and be a low-risk, high-reward type of player. One of those situations that could look at Antonio Brown as a low-risk, high-reward option is the Houston Texans. I'm sure everyone knows at this point that the Texans traded DeAndre Hopkins, an all-world wide receiver talent, to the Arizona Cardinals in this past offseason. And I'm sure pretty much all of you know that Deshaun Watson saw that tweet from Chad Ochocinco saying AB to the Texans. Now, in terms of what this move would be in terms of a football aspect, it really does make sense for the Texans to at least look at Antonio Brown because they really don't have a number 1 wide receiver. They really just have a lot of speed guys and a couple other solid red zone targets. Between their wide receiver core, they've got names like Will Fuller, Randall Cobb, Brandon Cooks. Not a lot of guys who really present more than a deep threat and just pure speed. And honestly, in the NFL now, a deep threat with pure speed is pretty much all you need to be able to put points up on the board. However, even though all of these players that are on the Houston Texans wide receiver core, even though they all have pure speed, all of them really do have a lot of injury history. Will Fuller hasn't played a full season throughout his whole NFL career, I believe. And Brandon Cooks has had many concussions throughout his career in the league as well. Even without their injury history, Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks aren't necessarily the prototype number 1 wide receiver like Antonio Brown would be with this team. And Antonio Brown being added to the team would just add a whole nother dimension to the offense, because losing someone like DeAndre Hopkins, not only is it losing an incredible talent in terms of wide receiver standpoint, but it loses the ability to shift someone's defense to make them target that one player. If a defense is targeting a wide receiver, whether it's for double teams, whether it's just rolling coverage over to him, it helps the run game, it helps the other receivers, it helps the tight end, it helps everyone out if you have that one generational type talent at the wide receiver spot. And losing DeAndre Hopkins, they lost that generational type talent to make coverages roll over to his side or just to purely get double teamed for the whole entire game. So in terms of a football fit, I think it would be a great fit. Not only what he brings to game day in terms of his talent, but also his work ethic. I mean, Antonio Brown, say whatever you want about his past couple of years. I understand that people saw him get his contract and thought that his work ethic went down the hill, but I still think it's there. I mean, you don't go from a 6th-round pick that everyone was saying was too small to play the position to being an all-pro wide receiver without having an immense amount of talent. And, maybe he would be able to bring that to Houston, and some of it would be able to rub off on all the other younger wide receivers that are there. Now, the most important aspect of this potential signing for the Texans would be how he would be able to make up for his past off the field issues. And I'm not even saying that he's able to make up for those issues, just for the Texans and Bill O'Brien to be able to know if he's past those issues, if he's able to just focus on football and stay out of the spotlight in terms of off the field issues and be able to just be solely focused on the football season, because the past year or so has seen Antonio Brown, fighting with the GM. He burned his foot skin off in the cryotherapy tube. He had his issues with his trainer. He had issues in Pittsburgh with silly little things like team MVP voting. So he's had silly little issues throughout this past 12 to 16 month stretch where he just has been in the spotlight for all of the wrong reasons. And I think if Bill O'Brien and the Houston Texans front office is able to figure out that Antonio Brown is past having all those issues, then they'll probably think about bringing him in as their star wide receiver. But at this point, I just don't think they're able to know. And without them being able to know, they're probably not going to bring him in. However, I would also be able to say that them not being able to know, even if they don't know, they might still bring in Antonio Brown, because Bill O'Brien has shown, if he's having a problem with one of his players, he will get rid of them. Just look at what happened with DeAndre Hopkins. He did not hesitate to trade him for, a 4th-round pick or 3rd-round pick, whatever it was. So, Bill O'Brien, if Antonio Brown is acting up or if he's having off-the-field issues that pop up again or whatever ends up happening with Antonio Brown, Bill O'Brien will be able to just get rid of him. And that's kind of it's somewhat one of the good things about having your head coach as your GM, as he knows what's happening on the football field. Sometimes a GM doesn't really understand what's happening on the football field, but the head coach really does. Bill O'Brien really knows what's happening on the football field. So if he sees Antonio Brown is taking all the spotlight for himself, or if he sees that Antonio Brown is having issues that are off the field issues, I'm sure he won't hesitate to either trade or cut him. So with all that being said, that at this point, I think it would be a really low-risk, high-reward move for the Texans and for Bill O'Brien to make as the GM of this team, because he knows he has a quick trigger in terms of getting rid of players that are troublesome for the team. But he also knows, he should know at least, that this wide receiver core is really not enough for Deshaun Watson and the rest of the offense to go into the next level in terms of being an elite team. And Antonio Brown really would make this team elite, because any defense going against this team is going to have to worry about the top-tier speed that Will Fuller, Brandon Cooks, and Kenny Stills present. Now they're going to have to worry about incredible route running as well as incredible speed with Antonio Brown. So it presents a great problem. It presents a great prospect for the Houston Texans offense, and it would present a great problem for any defense that they would be going against. With everything being said, that's going to be the video for me. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you hit the like button. If you didn't, make sure you hit the dislike button. Any feedback from you guys at this point is much appreciated. If you think I forgot to talk about anything in the video, make sure you leave a comment. I try to get back to as many of you guys as possible. If you like the content that I put out, make sure you hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.